Well, hello there everyone. Welcome back to my channel. And before I get into this video, I'm just going to say I'm very thankful for all the support I've been getting for my last two videos. I mean, again, yeah, it's not a ton in the grand scheme of things, but I'm very proud of them, although I could have spoken a little more clearly and I messed up some of my lines. In my Archie Sonic video, I said we don't know Dr. Definitivus Endgame. We do. What I meant to say is that we don't exactly know how he was going to achieve everything. And I said that Captain America's shield had way too many brown straps on it in the video on the first Avenger, which was I meant his costume. But before we get into this, I'm just going to tell you all if you like this video, well, like and subscribe. So, without further ado, let's get into today's video. So, Transformers Animated is, in my opinion, the greatest TV show ever made. Not just the best cartoon ever, not just the best Transformer show ever, the greatest TV show ever made. After all, something like this is very opinionated. Some people might say Avatar The Last Airbender, or Happy Days, or whatever. But I've got to say Transformers Animated. It just had so many unique qualities about it that really make it stand out among just TV in general, and I really enjoy it. So today I'm going to walk you through all 42 episodes and give my definitive thoughts on Transformers Animated. So, to start, Transform and Roll Out Part 1. This is a really good premiere. Not just this first part, but all three parts of the Transform and Roll Out special. It's not my favorite TV show premiere ever, that'd go to Ninjago. Those pilots were amazing. But Transform and Roll Out is really good, especially the first part. We get introduced to all 5 of the main Autobots. We get to see their personalities unfold. We get to understand the Decepticons in this show. We get some human bits at the end. There's a lot that goes on in this first part, and it's really good. It has so many nice details I like, such as the G1 footage being used as war footage of the Great War, which is pretty clever, and it shows how, yeah, in this universe, the Great War wasn't just a Saturday morning cartoon, which is why Ratchet calls it a load of scrap metal. I also really like seeing the Cybertronian designs. It's something I always like in Transformers. You don't get that a ton, so it's always nice to see it here, especially since they are very unique. I mean, some of them even got toys, which is quite nice. We get to see the Allspark in this show, which, yeah, this and the movie, which created the Allspark, began the Allspark being overused as a MacGuffin. But hey, I like it in this show, even if it has some issues. But those are mostly just nitpicks, so it's not too big of a deal. There are so many little details in this episode I like. I think it's pretty funny that as soon as Megatron seems to have blown up in the Autobots ship, Starscream says, "This is a dark day in Decepticon history. Now I will be our leader." And then he turns around and asks, "Where'd everybody go?" And you can see that all the other 3 Decepticons just immediately left in escape pods without a second thought and didn't even care. It's pretty funny. And yeah, Starscream is already treacherous in the first episode, voiced brilliantly by Tom Kenny. This is probably my favorite role of his, even more so than SpongeBob, but they're pretty different, so it's not really fair to compare them. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this first episode. Megatron and the Decepticons really feel intimidating, and the little human bit we get at the end is nice. Then Transform and Roll Out Part 2, where the show takes more of this form than it would be for the rest of the series. We get to see the Autobots get their Earth modes. We get to see more of the human characters, such as Captain Van Zone, and him finally saying, "This is why I hate machines." Captain Van Zone is my favorite human Transformers character, by the way. Yeah, there's a lot in this episode that's pretty good too. I like the idea of Ratchet being the one to stay behind while the other Autobots go and fight the giant cockroach monster. I guess it doesn't really matter that much, but I don't know why. I just like that Ratchet is the one that decides to stay behind. Maybe because he thinks he's had enough action in his day and doesn't want any more. That's one way to look at it. Yeah, there's not a ton to say about this part, but it's really fun. It's charming. It's good. Then Transform and Roll Out Part 3. Fun fact, if you read the original production Bible for Transformers Animated, that dates back to a little over a year before the show premiered. this episode was just going to be another episode later in the season, but I guess Cartoon Network really wanted that three-parter, so they made it the third part of this, which, hey, it works very well in that regard. Yeah, there are some issues with it, such as Optimus dying and then immediately being brought back to life with the Allspark key, and this is never mentioned again. Probably because then death in the show wouldn't really matter. But anyway, this episode is just great. The opening where the Autobots interact with humans is pretty funny. You get to see more of their personalities. They get the plant that they spend the rest of the series living in. Starscream is great, as always, in this episode. I always like it when Starscream is presented as a kind of main villain. It was done for a while in Transformers Prime, which I've got a lot of issues with Transformers Prime, but I enjoyed that little story arc. It's fun to see a different main villain, especially Starscream, since he always wants to be the leader of the Decepticons. He always wants to be the big bad, the main villain, the exalted leader of the Decepticons. And yeah, this episode's really good. Not much more to say. Then home is where the spark is. I love the way this episode begins with that Animated was kind of pitched as a superhero show, a little bit of influence from the success of Ben 10 and Teen Titans, but I feel like it doesn't quite land in that category. It's a Transformers show, which is really more of a genre in and of itself, with how diverse the brand is with all its ideas and characters. The opening where Optimus Prime beats up a criminal called the Angry Archer, named after Hasbro executive Aaron Archer, is just really funny and shows off this series' sense of humor. Megatron's brought back online. We get to hear some of his more brilliant voice work from Corey Burton, which, shout out to Corey Burton. He's just an amazing voice actor. He played three main characters on this show. That takes a lot of talent. That's not to mention all the other roles he's had throughout the years. But anyway, this episode is also the best animated episode in the entire show. The animation in this series is never amazing, but it's usually just serviceable, which when you consider how good the writing and the style and the voice acting is and the theme song, can't forget that theme song, you can excuse something like that. It's really more of a nitpick with the animation errors, which, side note, Bulkhead is missing his Autobot logo on this picture. It's pretty funny. But that's something you would hardly notice. This episode's a lot of fun. The Autobots get to uh they get to experience the plant more, and Megatron sends those little pocket bot things to infest it and have all the machinery attack them. It's a pretty simple but fun plot. That's what I like about Transformers Animated, especially in its first season. It was, despite being criticized for being more different, it's probably more like G1 than any other part of the entire franchise. Even the ones that literally have the G1 designs, like the Bumblebee movie, which, okay, I guess that's kind of different. Same thing with the War for Cybertron trilogy, or the Prime Wars trilogy, or the IDW comics. Huh. Well, that's mostly thanks to the late Derek J. White's input, since he was such a big G1 fan. Then Total Meltdown. The first episode to have a human supervillain as the main threat, and I really like Meltdown. I mean, I guess Peter Stormare, who also went on to play Lord Dreg in 2012 Ninja Turtles, he did a really good job there. He's not a bad voice actor. I think he did a good job in this episode. He gets better in his later appearances, but I don't know. I think he was just a little too, not dry, but in a show like Transformers Anime, I think he could have been a little more high energy, but that's just me. He did a good job. This episode is really funny. Seeing stuff like Bulkhead, just the way he transforms the kibble hanging off his back into a chair and watches TV is really funny. And how Bumblebee tries to wrestle this Colossus Rhodes guy, I guess. We get more of Captain Fanzone. The threat is something I'm sure I'm surprised other Transformer shows haven't done. Well, I'm sure some of them have done the idea of a character or something with powers that can melt the Autobots. Again, nothing super impressive, but I really enjoyed this episode. Not much more to say, which I've said that multiple times in this video already, but you get the idea. Most of these episodes are just really good, and it takes a little while for me to really dig deep into these. Okay, Blast from the Past. Introduction to the Dinobots? Great. I'm not mad they didn't make 5 or 6 Dinobots in this show. I think just having 3 was a nice number, and sure, only Grimlock talks, but let's be honest, what would Snarl and Swoop have even said? Grimlock is the only one that really matters. Sorry to these fans of the other Dinobots. I like the other Dinobots. I mean, even in, say, Cyberverse, outside of Grimlock, who wasn't even a member of the Dinobots originally, the only one that really was important in terms of exposition and stuff like that was Swoop. The other ones were pretty much just there for comedic relief, which, yeah, they're funny, but there's not much to them. Same thing in G1. Okay, anyways, back to the rest of the episode. The fact that this episode starts with the Autobots learning about dinosaurs in a Jurassic Park ripoff thing is pretty funny. Uh, I believe this is when Sumdac finally learns about Megatron and starts getting manipulated by him, which was a really interesting plot. I really enjoyed that story. This is one of the reasons why this is the best version of Megatron, in my opinion. I like seeing Bumblebee and Ratchet combine their powers, which you can see in one of the pictures here. I like how the Autobots have powers in this show. Well, kind of, but it was like how in G1 you might have, oh, Sideswipe had a jetpack, which he hardly ever used. But that was only really because Sideswipe didn't do anything. You know, just like most of the Autobots in G1. Just there to sell toys, get a focus episode or two, and that's it. Unless you were Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Ironhide, or Wheeljack, or Grimlock, or I don't know, Rodimus Prime, I guess, you didn't get much focus in G1. So I like that here. And Bulkhead also gets to be pretty funny in this episode, and Prowl is great in this episode. This is where we fully see how much he cares about other creatures and his love of Earth, because he comes from a metal planet. Even though that planet is alive, he's never been able to experience an organic planet before. And he can sense in the Dinobots that they are alive. They have sparks. They aren't just soulless machines. And he and Bulkhead end up saving them by the end of the episode, which I really appreciated. I like Prowl and animated. This is one of those examples where a character reuses a G1 name and ends up completely overshadowing the G1 character. There's a video by TJ Omega about that. And sure, we get new Prowl toys, but I mean, if you ask fans which is the best Prowl, I think they're going to say animated Prowl. Next, my all-time favorite episode and the one where I can really dig deep. The Thrill of the Hunt. Oh boy, this episode is absolutely amazing. It's the second best animated episode of the series, which again isn't a super high bar, but it's pretty good. And this one is, oh boy. Marty Eisenberg has discussed about this episode at TFCon this year, which is that when you do a show, especially one like this, you shouldn't. He wrote for Transformers Prime, which he had a problem with Prime in this regard, which is that you shouldn't start a show that's just immediately dark. A show has to start off a little bit, can have some serious moments, animated did, but you have to slowly build to that serious tone. You can't just throw it in audiences' faces, because once you've done that for the entire series, whenever the show isn't serious or gets really super serious, or even when it doesn't, but say the scene at the end of Prime Season 2 where the Autobots base gets blown up, yeah, it's impactful, but Prime was dark, and so, or when something like Bulkhead getting that life-threatening injury happened, you don't care as much because the show just had plenty of moments like that. But this episode is unique because yeah, this show was still was lighter, even if it was still serious. So yeah, the start. I'm just gonna analyze this entire episode, scene by scene probably. So yeah, it starts with Ratchet looking in a auto repair shop window and saying that it's barbaric. And he asks, what kind of idiot would buy any of this junk? And then Bumblebee drives out, he got one of those little Hawaiian dancers you hang in a window, a, a horn that plays the G1 theme song. And then he tells Ratchet, enjoy the bright lights, the big city. The night is still young, unlike some bots I know. Love animated Bumblebee. And so, yeah, the Autobots are just hanging around, and the lights in the city just turn off out of nowhere. And then a mysterious spiked car shows up and gets Ratchet thinking. He remembers how he met RC in the Great War, who is voiced by Susan Blue returning from G1. Well, that was only because she was the voice director of this show, but I always appreciate stuff like that. And she's missing a leg, and Ratchet has to fix her up, but then he and her get captured by Lockdown, voiced by Lance Henriksen. I don't like celebrity voice actors, but there are a few times I do. Stuff like this, which is where it's a cartoon, so every other character outside of, I don't know, Weird Al Yankovic's appearance, we'll get to later, they were just regular voice actors. I don't mind a celebrity guest. And I don't hate celebrity voice actors. I mean, Jack Black is great as Kung Fu Panda or some of the other celebrities in those movies, but I I usually just don't like it in the movies, but I like it in this show, especially since Lance Henriksen played Lockdown so well. This kind of smooth talking yet menacing trophy hunter that is kind of a Frankenstein's monster is going to be played up way more in the original. It was played up way more in the production Bible, but I'm glad he ended up looking the way he does here. So yeah, we see that Lockdown scarred Prowl emotionally, and he he was going to take the activation codes RC was carrying in her head, which were super important, which we'll get to later. And Prowl had no choice, but when he was able to just barely get them to escape, he had to wipe her memory. So a Lockdown couldn't get the codes, but he had to take away a bot's memory, and that really hurt him. Combined with the fact in this episode, we learn why the thing on Prowl's head Ratchet's head is missing. Have I been saying Prowl this whole time? Anyway, where the thing on Ratchet's head, a piece of it is missing, as he tells the Autobots, that's not a car and it's not a guy. It's a Decepticon, sort of. His name's Lockdown. He's the one who gave me this. I talked to Marty Eisenberg about this once, actually. Or, well, he said this in interviews, but he said that it was just a design choice. Okay, Ratchet's old, he's been in the Great War, but the writers ended up thinking, what would happen if we actually showed where Ratchet got that? And this episode is super impactful. Lockdown easily beating up the Autobots, noting that Prowl actually put up a pretty good fight, which kind of foreshadows what happens between his rivalry with Prowl, which happens in season 2 and 3, which I really appreciate. Always like when shows build off something that already came before, even if it wasn't necessarily planned. And Lockdown captures Optimus, and the end of the episode, we see that Ratchet finally tells Optimus some stuff from the Great War. We don't need to hear what it was, much as I would have liked to, but that's just how it ends. Not with goofy music or anything, just with a serious moment of Ratchet sitting down and telling Optimus the horrible things he probably had to endure during the Great War. And other scenes in this episode, like Ratchet telling Lockdown, "You want me to use this EMP to make your pain go away? This was a medical tool, but you turned it into a weapon." Super compelling stuff. I'm really glad this show got to do moments like this, and another one of the reasons why I eternally respect this show, and this is definitely my all-time favorite episode. Okay, moving on to a way more energetic and fun episode, which is also one of my favorites, Nanosec. This was written to be the pilot, where they had Marty Eisenberg and I believe Derek J. Wyatt and even Matt Youngberg maybe voice some of the characters, which is pretty funny. I mean, Kean Carlisle actually got the DVD copy, some rare Derek J. Wyatt DVD copy of this episode with different music, which is pretty interesting. You should probably check that video out. But anyway, this is just a really fun episode. Megatron, being in Isaac Sumdack's computers, is able to get money to bail this guy out of jail, and then get him a super speed suit, which Isaac Sumdack's company was working on, and have him transport this rare substance called Destronium to Megatron so he can help in repairing himself. And along the way, the Autobots have to stop this speedster as they notice that he's also aging the faster he runs, which is a pretty funny idea. Because, I mean, think about it. I've heard this in a Ben 10 video before, which is that a speedster, what looks like a few seconds to us, could feel like hours to him. He might actually age, which, well, at least that doesn't. I always thought that's an interesting detail. But there's just so much to love from this episode, especially Bumblebee. This is probably his best showcase in the entire series. He gets these rocket boosters, which nobody Ratchet does not want to install on him. Which the line is, you think the girl's gonna use that key to install those things in you? Course not. I was gonna have a Docbot do it for me. And he ends up doing something that the first Avengers movie and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes definitely stole from this. Okay, they did not steal that ending where Bumblebee flies up and has to toss the explosive device into the air and then almost dies from the falling through into the atmosphere. But yeah, I really like this episode. I like the lesson that Bumblebee has to learn using my head and my thrusters. And yeah, the thrusters look really cool. I'm glad they included them on his new Legacy figure, which I don't like that figure, but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, this episode is just the perfect example of the show at its funniest. It's just a fun, exciting, action-packed, character-rich adventure, and there's a lot of merit in that. Not every episode needs to be part of some big overarching plot, even though this episode technically is. It's just a fun story. Then along came a spider. Another, the next, if the Thrill of the Hunt was Ratchet's Deep Season 1 episode, and I guess you could say that Blast from the Past was Prowl's, this is definitely Optimus Prime's. So I like how this episode starts with the Autobots learning about Halloween in a pumpkin patch with Sari, who, yeah, I haven't really mentioned Sari, but she does a lot more in this episode that's worth mentioning. And Optimus just says, so the point of this holiday is to um, scare strangers into giving you sugar infused nuggets. And Sari says, you say that as if it's a bad thing. But then Optimus sees the spider decoration, is surprised, and he's asked, you look like you've seen a ghost, Big Bot. And he says, just a ghost from my past. And we learn the backstory between him, Sentinel Prime, and Elita 1. I like how Sentinel Prime's rivalry with him was technically set up in the first episode, where Optimus tries to contact Cybertron. He gets Sentinel Prime and he says, Optimus Prime, you mean they still let you command other Autobots? And Optimus says, don't start, Sentinel. And here's where we find out why. Optimus was friends with Sentinel Prime and Elita 1. That's a very nice reference considering how nothing Elita 1 was in G1, just a one episode character. So anyway, yeah, Sentinel convinced them to go off to an organic planet, even though that was illegal on Cybertron, and they ended up Sentinel and Optimus ended up escaping, but not before Lita seemed to have died in this attack from giant spider monster things. And Sentinel got really mad at Optimus, and we don't see what happened right after this until way later, but we get the sense that, yeah, this is the reason why Sentinel Prime does not like Optimus Prime. And this moment really affected Optimus. And we eventually see that when Bumblebee, Sari, and Bulkhead go trick-or-treating, it's so funny. Sari dresses up as Optimus Prime's G1 design says, check out my costume, Optimus. Autobots, transform and roll out. I'm scared of spiders. Optimus just says, that's not what I sound like. Is it? Bumblebee dresses up as a vampire, which is just amazing. And Bulkhead takes a fumigation tent off a house and uses it to dress up as a ghost. Yeah, I love the show. Then they get stalked by Black Arachnia from Beast Wars, which I love how this show used old characters in new and exciting ways. And it turns out that those spiders mutated Elita 1 from all those years ago into Black Arachnia, and she ended up joining the Decepticons. And now she wants to steal Sari's Allspark powered key to try to get rid of her organic half because she thinks she's a freak. After all, there's a reason organic plants are off limit to Cybertronians, which is that Cybertronians view organics as some kind of disgusting things. And this episode just really shows off that very well. I get to see that Black Arachnia isn't quite super evil the way the other Decepticons are. She's more tragic, but so while I guess you can feel sympathetic for her, especially later on in the show, this show does not excuse it. She's definitely evil. I mean, she's a Decepticon and she almost killed all these people. Yeah. She gets some funny interactions with Sari, too. I always like those. Then Sound and Fury. This is probably my least favorite episode of the entire series. It's not bad, it's still enjoyable, but this one's just a lot weaker than the other 41. So first of all, I like this show's design for Soundwave. I like his voice from Jeff Bennett, which is obviously computer modulated. But anyway, yeah, I like this design. It's the first time I believe he became an SUV, which if he can't become a boombox, I like that. I mean, we already have enough Decepticon jets, and yet another jet Soundwave is pretty boring. Or I guess I like the movies made him a car because it made him stand out from the other Decepticons. But eh, I think making him an SUV is a good design choice. I like the red Derek J. Wyatt styled glasses that you'd see on a lot of his designs, and of course, his line of "I am Soundwave, I am Decepticon, the revolution begins now." I really like that. I really like that line. Him turning all of Detroit's machinery against everyone. This funny montage is enjoyable. But his origin of okay, so Megatron said he'd be kind to Sumdac by building him a birthday present for Sorry, which is Soundwave, and the whole thing with Bulkhead, and it's pretty predictable. Again, it's not bad. This episode is some good humor, but and it's still enjoyable. But this one's just kind of there, I guess. And honestly, that's probably one of the worst criticisms I can give something. Which again, as far as things just being there go, this is definitely high on that list of other shows that have episodes that are just there, they just exist. And Bulkhead faking being under Soundwave's control and then smashing him into pieces was really funny. And then that image of Bumblebee getting almost destroyed by a trash bot. So yeah, this one's funny. It's just not nearly as good as the other ones. Okay, Lost and Found. Lugna and Blitzwing make their grand debut. They are the comedy team of the show, the Bebop and Rocksteady, the Toka and Razar, the okay, yeah, just Ninja Turtles characters. Old comedy duos like Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. That's what they're like. I love the comedy duo trope, and these two are great. To start off, I don't really care about G1 Blitzwing. I mean, okay, yeah, he had that arc in Five Faces of Darkness, but most of the characters in G1 weren't really characters. They were just there to sell toys, which, I mean, they had cool designs, but if Blitzwing were just the way he was there in animated, he would be so boring. So the fact that they gave him three faces, a, a just serious stoic one, which is the one he shows the least, an super angry one, and then his just complete lunatic face, which is the one we get most often, is just really funny and it spices up the character more. And then Lugnut is just super loyal to Megatron. That is it, and it's really funny. All hail Megatron! And the way the Autobots think they're gonna have to leave Earth because they can't let the Decepticons um get the Allspark because they're thinking there's no way they can stand a chance against the Decepticons because yeah, the Decepticons in this show aren't just Saturday morning cartoon villains. I mean, as much as I love Beast Wars, the Predacons were idiots. Aside from Megatron, who isn't even smart until the end of season 1, most of the Predacons were just dumb. They were buffoons. I mean, that worked in the context of Beast Wars, and I still like them a lot, especially Wasp Manor, but they weren't that convincing of threats. But anyways, back to animated. So Sari is completely distraught. The Autobots are gonna have to leave, and when we get to this nice moment between her and Ratchet is saying, "Yeah, he may seem gruff and everything, but he really does care about Earth and all the people. If anything were, as he says, if anything were to happen to you or this planet, I could never forgive myself." Yeah, it really goes a step further to humanize these characters. They do grow. And in a way, real people do. You don't just instantly see the way real people have changed. I mean, not fully anyway. People aren't just going to show off everything they've done and all the stuff, all the ways they've grown immediately. So I like that. And of course, the cliffhanger where after Lugna and Blitzwing seem to have been beaten, Starscream has returned and he has found them. Great cliffhanger. Then Survival of the Fittest. Yet another Meltdown episode and a great showcase of Captain Fanzone. So Sari's been kidnapped by the Dinobots, who everyone finds out are alive because Prowl and Bulkhead didn't tell anyone. They end up getting trailed by Captain Fanzone, who thinks they've got something to do with Sari's kidnapping. And they end up finding out that Meltdown has made it to the island, is enslaving the Dinobots by pretty much just torturing them with his touch, which burns them, and getting them to do his dirty work. And then he also has pretenders as giant mutant experiments he made, which didn't end up working out so well. This one's a lot of fun. So the rest of the main cast learns about the Dinobots, and the scene where the Dinobots end up just pummeling Meltdown at the end is really funny. Yeah, and that's not much more to say about this one. It works in the same way a lot of season 1 episodes do, and even some from season 2. It's just a fun, energetic adventure. Okay, Headmaster. This is probably one of the best Transformers reinventions ever. I like the concept of Headmasters in G1, but I mean, this show making it so that some lunatic guy that was voiced by what's his name, Arjit from Ben 10, is made this giant head robot to take over other technology as bodies and cuts off Bulkhead's head and uses it as a body. And Bulkhead's head has to be brought around by the other Autobots. It's so silly. And the end where the headmaster is going to blow up the entire city with nuclear weapons or something like that. Unless they give him billions of dollars and he's just going to do it anyway. This episode is completely chaotic. It's just really funny. This is where Bulkhead's love of art comes in, which I really appreciate. I like the Autobots developing Earth hobbies. We also get this really funny scene with him and Bumblebee, where Bumblebee, tired of always being called short, especially in Total Meltdown, he has all these lines like, "Oh, I get it. You're tired of looking up to me." Him giving Bulkhead this cheap robot body thing he just threw together is pretty funny, and yeah, this one's great. I know some people think the Headmaster is really annoying, but I think he's really funny. I'm glad that he got one appearance per season. His gimmick wasn't overdone, but it was used just well enough. Then Nature Calls. Perhaps the definition of this show's energetic adventures. Prowl is tired of Bumblebee and Sari pretty much just becoming couch potatoes, takes them camping, where we get all these fantastic character interactions, tons of great facial expressions. They end up fighting some space barnacles, which somehow landed. Oh yeah, they landed on Earth because they were attached to the Autobot ship, which crash landed in Lake Erie. Okay, so yeah, the barnacle monster takes over Bumblebee and Prowl too, and Sari has to save the day at the end. I think this one is just great. You should if you haven't seen this show in a while, you should totally watch this one. Lines like, "You don't see my media player turning anybody into zombies, actually," or "Are you sure you know how to go camp? Are you sure you've been camping before?" "Sure, I've done it before. I've seen it in a movie once." Yeah, this one's really funny. It just shows how, I guess, childlike Bumblebee is, but not completely idiotic. You're gonna see the Bumblebee and Prowl act like brothers to Sari, and Sari acts like their sister, and this one's a lot of fun. And at the end, it just has this completely out of nowhere scene where Sumdac recovers the remains of Megatron's body. I love this one. Okay, season 1 finale, Megatron Rising Part 1. Megatron is finally sick of waiting around doing nothing, just waiting for his body to be rebuilt, which... Side note, characters always say to Sumdac later in the show, "This coming from the guy who rebuilt Megatron." I mean, I guess he discovered his body, but Sumdac did not rebuild Megatron. I think even without the scrap metal he got from the remains of his body, I think Sari's Allspark he could have just completely rebuilt Megatron. Anyway, so yeah, once again the Autobots think they're gonna have to leave Earth. I think it's been a while, but or maybe it was oh yeah, they don't want Sari to have the Allspark key because they don't want it to leave it in the hands of a human. Ratchet has to take care of it, ends up getting his hand torn off by Blitzwing. Bumblebee fights Starscream in one of Starscream's best showcases, where he starts monologuing, Bumblebee zaps him, and then Starscream just grabs Bumblebee and screams, "You interrupted my speech!" Excuse me for 1 second. Okay, back to the video. So yeah, we see Megatron's return at the end, which is, oh, it's so good. Surely you wish to see the results of which you helped create, Professor Sumdac. Megatron is great in the show for some of the same reasons Beast Wars Megatron was great. He portrays this I guess, almost Shakespearean villain that talks in these big words. He's some kind of mastermind. He has this presence to him that I really like. It makes him stand out more, especially among other Megatrons, which, yeah, I love most other Megatrons, but sometimes they can get a little bland. Anyway, so yeah, that's what happens in this one. Or Black Arachnia kidnaps Sari and tries to use the key, wants to use her Allspark key to make her normal again, even though she already found out that wouldn't work. Okay, that's such a small detail, I can excuse this one. All the Decepticons need to show up in this episode. Then, Megatron Rising Part 2, the Season 1 finale. Definitely the best season finale out of the three. Megatron returns, does the one thing every other Megatron just doesn't do for some reason, which is kill Starscream. Okay, Cyberverse Megatron does it, but that's the exception. This is the only other Megatron to just straight up kill Starscream, which shows to the other to his other Decepticons, don't cross me. He beats up the Autobots, and they all have to pitch in a last-ditch effort to try and destroy Megatron. Which, by the way, there's just one line I've never heard anybody mention before, but so we know later on there's a plot twist with Sari at the end of season 2, and Marty Eisenberg has said that this show, season 1 and 2 are made back to back, same time. So there's this little moment where Zach tells Sari, there's something I've been meaning to tell you, but he just ends up not telling her. I think that was the plot twist he meant. It's kind of like how in Kung Fu Panda 1, Mr. Ping is going to tell Po that he's adopted, probably, but then he just ends up not doing it and saves it for the sequel. I like little moments like that. Anyway, so yeah, the Autobots have to band together in one last-ditch effort attempt, even after their spirits are broken and they're beaten up physically and mentally, and they're able to go in a last stand against the Decepticons, such as Bumblebee using his greatest strength, his obnoxious personality, to beat Blitzwing, Megatron gaining the Allspark, which just means putting it in his chest, and maybe it would take time for him to power up. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't really make anything happen to him. But then, in a really cool moment, Optimus grabs the Allspark key, stabs it into Megatron, says, "You want power, Megatron? Then have your fill!" Which, hey, it mirrors what Megatron did to Starscream. I've just realized that now. And this ends up having Megatron being blown away, and the Allspark is seemingly blown to bits, but Optimus still has the key. And despite what he said about Sari having the key before, he gives it to her and says, and the most powerful object in the universe is far too dangerous to have in the hands of mere Autobots. I really like that moment, and yeah, this episode really establishes the Autobots are a family now. Uh, I like to think that Ratchet is the grandpa, Optimus is the dad, and then Prowl is the older brother, Bumblebee, Bulkhead are the younger brothers. But then there's that great cliffhanger where they don't know what happened to Sumdac, and Megatron somehow having survived the most powerful thing in the universe blowing up inside of him. But anyways, he has survived, completely beaten up though, holding Sumdac in his palm and says, "It seems you and I are destined to be intertwined once more, Professor Sumdac." Great way to cap off season 1. This is definitely my favorite introductory season to any Transformers show. It's definitely not my favorite season of any Transformers show, but it's really good. Then, Season 2, Episode 1, The Elite Guard. We get full introductions to Ultra Magnus, Sentinel Prime, and get introduced to Jazz in this show. First of all, can we just talk about how great Sentinel Prime is? He is the most hateable character in probably the entire franchise, and that's why we all love him. I mean, before this show, Sentinel Prime was also just a name used in comics once or twice, I believe, but this is what made Sentinel Prime memorable among fans. Yeah, and the movies ended up using him, which, yeah, he was completely different, but just the fact that now Sentinel Prime is even memorable, it has two different, even if he has two different versions, is definitely important. We get to see Ultra Magnus, now he's portrayed as this stoic, great leader of the Autobots that they all immediately respect. Yet, when the Elite Guard takes in Optimus Prime and his team, Sentinel just hates them for associating with those filthy organics. They're known to spew venom. We all know that, don't we, Optimus? Nice little callback to Along Came a Spider. With Jazz is shown to not be some stuck-up jerk like Sentinel. Jazz doesn't really do anything in the animated. I mean, he does, but he doesn't have a ton of character, which I guess is fine. Jazz is likable. I like his voice. I like his design. I like that he has nunchucks. Yeah, I like Jazz in this episode. We get to see that the Decepticons have set up some secret underground base that has barriers that block the Autobots from finding it. Sari is trying to run her dad's company in place of him, and we get another scene from Porter C. Powell, who now ends up becoming a major villain, I guess, as an evil businessman, because we saw him in Total Meltdown. He was even with the same voice actor and design and everything. He was talking to Meltdown before he got turned into a monster, saying, even the prisons won't give you test subjects anymore. And so yeah, the fact that he's back and becomes important is a nice bit of world building. And yeah, this one's really funny, especially and enjoyable, especially for that ending. Well, just really any moments where Sentinel Prime gets roasted, I guess, where they meet the Dinobots, and Optimus is told to stay away because they're dangerous, and Sentinel says he doesn't care, he's not afraid of some stupid cheap technology, and the Dinobots almost kill him, and Ultra Magnus has to step in. And then the ending, where Sentinel is still yelling at Optimus for being so incompetent, but then Optimus just sticks it to him and says, you're on my turf now, Sentinel Prime. So you can take your I guess what do you say? You can take your attitude. You can take your condescending attitude and stick it up your hard drive. And then Sentinel just gets yelled at in his face like he deserves. And then when Sentinel complains to Ultra Magnus saying, "But he disobeyed a direct order, Commander," and Ultra Magnus just stares at him and says, "Optimus Prime may be a little rough around the edges, but in the heat of battle, he exhibited the qualities of a true leader. Something you could stand to learn a thing or two from, Sentinel Prime." Okay. Next episode, The Return of the Headmaster. These two images are all I need to show. I mean, how could any animated fan forget this scene? Look down. Promise you won't laugh. Okay. Look down. Yeah, the image of the Headmaster comes back and steals Sentinel Prime's body. So there's this amazing scene of Sentinel's head laying on the ground, and Optimus just starts laughing in his face, and then Sentinel says, "You promised you wouldn't laugh!" And Optimus says, I sorry. And he has to have Sentinel ride around in his seat, and he says, "Let's not lose our you know what I mean." Yeah, this one's just great. The Headmaster is so enjoyable as he was before, saying, "I need a new robot body. Those old ones are so old, so 10 minutes ago. One like that." So Optimus and Sentinel interacting with the Earth press, saying stuff. Sentinel is trying to talk to a trash bot, and Optimus says, "You do realize that's a trash bot, right?" And Sentinel says, "Well, of course I do. I didn't arrive on this planet yesterday." "Well, actually, never mind." And of course, another great line. Or if I need any trash picked up, I'll talk to my good friend, Optimus Prime, or should I say, Maintenance Prime? And Optimus just storms off saying, "Maintenance Prime. Should have called him Pompous Gasbag Prime." Yeah, that's what I should have said. Great episode. Also, it shows more of how much of a jerk Porter C. Powell is. That mission accomplished. Once again, the Autobots might have to leave Earth. And they also have to tell Ultra Magnus that they might have accidentally destroyed the Allspark. But I've found evidence that it's more so that it's been split into pieces, like a typical MacGuffin, rather than just completely destroyed. And Sentinel, technically for the first time, sees a Decepticon and is absolutely terrified of Starscream. And Optimus says, "Oh, that's right, you've never seen one. It's called a Decepticon." Optimus just handcuffs Sentinel by tricking him. He's trying to leave. Sentinel says no, and he says, I like to see you try." Oh, this is great. And of course, yes, Starscream, an actually good reason for why Starscream is somehow immortal, which in G1 he just came back as a ghost for some reason, but here it's no. When the Allspark was split into pieces, a piece of it went into his head and made him immortal. So there's the amazing montage of Megatron killing Starscream and him coming back over and over again, with Lugnut and Blitzwing continuously dumping his body into the river. I love this episode. Oh, and the little brief subplot where they might have to take Sari to be cared for by Captain of Fan Zone. He just doesn't want anything to do with it. It's pretty funny. Garbage In, Garbage Out, which has been considered Marty Eisenberg had said this is his favorite episode he wrote anyway. Weird Al Yankovic sang that song Dare to Be Stupid that played on Wreck-Gar's planet in the G1 movie, but now he gets to voice Wreck-Gar, which is amazing. The Allspark brings to life a pile of trash, turns it into a sentient talking dump truck voiced by Weird Al Yankovic, and says stuff like, "I am Wreck-Gar, and I dare to be stupid!" and "I am Wreck-Gar, and I am only good for one thing, garbage!" Which is all because Ratchet yelled at him saying that. Because Ratchet has a little arc in this episode of having to work on his people skills, as Captain Fanzone says. This one's probably the funniest episode of the entire series. Wreck-Gar trying to find out what he is, what he's even supposed to do, him continuously messing up, and by the end saying, "I am Wreck-Gar, and I am a hero!" He has a nice little arc in this episode. And the fact that he doesn't die, he just is stuck at the bottom of the ocean by the end is really comedic. This is a great one. Then Velocity. Probably one of the most tame episodes of the show, I guess. I'm not really sure what the message of this one was supposed to be, since it seems kind of conflicting, but I enjoyed this one. This mysterious blue car is shown, which we find out later to be a very important character, and one you might recognize from G1. So this episode is it's more like a season 1 episode, in the way that it sets up some plots as mostly just a fun standalone adventure, which, to be fair, so was Garbage In, Garbage Out. But yeah, this one's really enjoyable. Excuse me for one moment. Okay, back to the video. Anyway, so that's the Bumblebee gets involved in underground street racing that Starry watches on TV through her pirated cable, I guess. And Bulkhead acts like some kind of father telling his kids, "You better not go out past curfew," or "What do you think you're up to, young man?" Which is pretty funny considering Bulkhead is the youngest one alongside Bumblebee. It's just funny to get to see the characters in different roles and situations they normally wouldn't be in. And Blitzwing is here too, and he gets to have some more good moments. And that's all I gotta say for this one. Next, Rise of the Constructicons. Proof that that Swindle isn't the only character from a combiner team that can be interesting, which is just the fact that maybe don't introduce all the members at once and maybe just don't have them combine. Okay, yeah, I know they wanted to do Devastator multiple times. They never allowed to do Devastator. They had never finalized all who would be in the team, and what their names would be, what the personalities would be, what they turn into, how Devastator would even look. That's a whole thing that's been talked to death among fans. But anyways, yeah, we got Mixmaster and Scrapper, just called Mix and Scrapper this time, who are portrayed as two co-workers, I guess, who are drunk. They get drunk off of oil, and Bulkhead brings them home as his friends, I guess, and it's portrayed as Bulkhead hanging around with a bad crowd of drunk construction workers. It's such a ridiculous plot, but it's so funny. I love how anime just came up with the idea that, well, I guess it goes back to that weird scene in G1 where the Decepticons get drunk off of Energon, but it really goes with the idea that Cybertronians can drink things. I mean, we saw that in their beast modes and Beast Wars, that stuff like you'd see Rat Trap eating, because Rat Trap could eat as a rat, but no, even as robots, they can just drink oil. And it's a thing that they just do. It's not even just a thing Mixmaster and Scrapper do. Megatron has his own personal blend of oil. And they get torn between should they go with the Decepticons with the better oil or Bulkhead who's their friend. They end up going with the Decepticons just because Megatron has better oil. And end up losing their memory. I love this episode. I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of Mixmaster and Scrapper, but I really like them. Okay, A Fistful of Energon, the second lockdown episode. This time, he's portrayed more as Prowl's rival, which is interesting. It's interesting when characters have more than one rival, they have multiple. Especially since, well, I do love Prowl so far. He hasn't done as much as the other Autobots, so it's nice for him to get a focus episode like this. He's the guy that always relies on nature, on himself. Kung Fu master kind of guy. Ninja, cyber ninja. But now he's he's letting these upgrades and mods go to his head, not realizing how they're really hurting him. And Lockdown says, you remind me of someone. Oh yeah, me. And this doesn't feel like one of those generic villain lines of, "You and I aren't so different," or "You should have killed me." And who could forget, "I've never felt such power." But yeah, this one I like, especially since we learn more about Lockdown's connection to Prowl in Season 3, but we'll get to that one. It also sets up the Starscream cloning storyline, which is really funny. Yeah, this one's a great one. I also, yeah, it's probably just a generic title that's been spread around through years, but I like how this episode is named after a Clint Eastwood Western. And it even feels like one. It feels like a few dollars more actually. The sequel to A Fistful of Dollars. Okay. Yeah, that's all there is for this one. Next, SUV is Society of Ultimate Villainy. But excuse me one more time. All right. Sorry for the delay. I am back. Okay. This one is the ultimate culmination of all the human supervillains, I guess. So you see ones like Professor Princess, who, yeah, I hate. Who doesn't? But she wasn't a main villain episode, thankfully. Just a one-time beginning of an episode villain. Or same thing with Angry Archer. So them as well as Nanosec and this new villain Slow-Mo, named after Samantha Lomo, another Hasbro executive. Great. They form their own supervillain team named after an SUV because an SUV shows up and with a recorded message saying it will help them, which turns out to be Swindle from G1, who again, further proof by Swindle is probably the only combiner character who actually stands out. In G1 anyway. He was only in here because he was Derek Wyatt's favorite character, and he's just such a great job with Swindle here, especially the voice acting from Fred Willard. Rest in peace. So yeah, Bumblebee tries to take on these human supervillains all by himself, and he and Sari end up having to work together with the human villains to defeat Swindle. And he ends up getting stuck in vehicle mode, especially since then at the end Optimus I think flattens his tire. Yeah, this one's really funny, and yeah, it just further adds to the fact that the Decepticons have a lot of personality in this show. Not just that they feel more like threats, but they're also just entertaining. I mean, Swindle isn't working for Megatron directly. He just is a Decepticon that is an arms dealer. He'll always sell to Megatron, but he doesn't work for him. Makes him stand out more, even amongst G1, where he already does stand out more than most of the other cons. Okay. Auto Boot Camp, another one of my all-time favorites. Okay. So Wasp, yes, like Waspinator from Beast Wars, seems to be some kind of weirdo lunatic guy with the weird cackly voice of Wasp. Instead of Waspinator, it's Wasp. He's on the run, and Ultra Magnus wants the Autobots to find him since he seems to have gone toward Earth. And we find out that Bumblebee and Bulkhead knew him back when they were in boot camp with Sentinel Prime as their drill sergeant, and they also served alongside Longarm, who was just made up for this show, and Ironhide. And it spawned the classic meme of, hit me with everything you got, sir! So yeah, I love the trope of the drill sergeant yelling at the young guys, and this one's got a lot of stuff going on. We really get to see where Bumblebee and Bulkhead came from. Bulkhead was just some hillbilly from the Energon farm, and Bumblebee was this scrappy guy who thought he was destined for great things. Which, as we see over the course of the show, he ended up doing great things, but he envisioned that as bleeding the Elite Guard against Decepticon skin plate. But he just ended up failing a bunch, making him and Bulkhead look like the biggest losers. Except for Longarm, who was nice to both of them, especially Bumblebee. But then Bumblebee finds out there is a Decepticon spy among them, and he ends up thinking it's Wasp and even showing the evidence and everything. But, this really messes with Wasp, super angry that Bumblebee, got him sent to the stockade, and as we find out later, Wasp was not the traitor. And also that Bulkhead accidentally nearly killed Sentinel, and even though Sentinel ended up thinking maybe Bumblebee's a good guy after finding out about Wasp, once he asks who knocked the building on top of him, he's going to blame Bulkhead for it because he thinks he's the biggest loser out of the whole bunch. But Bumblebee takes the blame for it. And that means he and Bulkhead ended up getting sent to Bulkhead's dream job. Space bridge repair guys, except among Cybertron, that's considered as being some low, dirty, dumb job that nobody wants. So while Bulkhead at least got to achieve his dream, Bumblebee ends up thinking he's just a loser now. And it cuts to bits in between, in the present, where the two of them are trying to find Megatron's base, and Bumblebee gets into a fight with Bulkhead, thinking, "You always thought small. That was your problem. You never dreamed big." But once Bumblebee gets caught under an avalanche, he's ended up being saved by Bulkhead, who says, "I did dream big, Bumblebee. I dreamed of being your friend." Sure, the message of friendship is a pretty generic trope in a kids show, but it's still a kids show. You can't. It is one. You can't deny that. And it was done very well here. Friendship isn't a bad message, so I like the way it was portrayed here. And just one more side note about this episode. I absolutely love that instead of doing sit-ups or push-ups, they do the Autobots in boot camp do transform-ups, which is so ridiculous. And in the end, we find out that yeah, Wasp wasn't the traitor, Longarm was, and as we see by changing up himself, that which really cool how the design was able to do that. He is actually Shockwave from G1, once again voiced by Corey Burton. Now that's amazing writing. Okay, Black Friday, Meltdown's final appearance. Sadly, he's locked in a plastic cell like Magneto in the X-Men movies, which it's a nice little detail. He gets ripped away by the Dinobots, who he thinks want to kill him, but it turns out they only did that because Black Arachnia told them to, who got washed up on Dinobot Island and got the Dinobots ended up falling in love with her, I guess. Gosh, this show is silly sometimes. And she ends up becoming their queen, and she wants Meltdown because she knows that he's been experimenting with techno-organic genetics before, and she wants him to be able to purge her of her organic half. She also ends up poisoning Bumblebee and Prattle and telling Optimus that if he doesn't help him, if he doesn't help her in this certain amount of time, she won't give him the antidote and his friends are going to die. So Bumblebee and Grimlock go to Detroit, and Grimlock is being hauled around like a dog and arguing with Optimus Prime, saying stuff like, "But Spider Lady like me better. Me Grimlock's still taller than you," which this is great, especially when you know that both Optimus and Grimlock are both voiced by David Kaye. So he was just talking to himself the whole time. So yeah, they get a beat up, or I guess, threaten Porter C. Powell's life, which is great because who doesn't hate that guy? And then it turns out Meltdown was actually going to use the device he had that Optimus got for him to not remove Black Arachnia's organic half, but her techno half, because he wanted to create an all-organic transformer. Now, of course, he's stopped, and Black Arachnia does end up leaving Optimus Prime the antidote, showing that she's not all evil after all. But we get an unresolved cliffhanger that will, even if anime does get a revival, this is probably never going to get resolved, which is that Meltdown survived being blown up into a pile of acid, and it seems he may have just maybe he's finally achieved his dream of an all-organic transformer. Okay, next. Sorry, No One's Home. A Home Alone parody where the Constructicons have to break into the Autobots' base to get the Allspark, I guess, and Sorry beats them up like the little chumps they are, while the rest of the Autobots are away trying to fight Blitzwing, I think, which their subplot isn't bad, it's pretty entertaining, but it's pretty obvious that wasn't the focus of this episode. The focus is Sorry, Home Alone style, making the Constructicons look like idiots and playing and listening to the G1 theme song. Yeah, that's all there is to say about this one. It's just a Home Alone parody that's really funny. Next, A Bridge Too Close Part 1. We get that blue car, or the return of that blue car. It turned out to be Blur, once again voiced by John Machida Jr. from G1. Notice how the show brought back a lot of G1 voice actors? Always appreciate stuff like that. So yeah, we see Megatron's plans of building his own space bridge are coming to fruition because he has to kidnap the smartest space bridge scientist in all the universe. Turns out, it's not some high fancy guy on Cybertron. It's Bulkhead, the guy who's considered to be the lovable idiot among the Autobots. And we get more of the Starscream clone stuff where, so Starscream's clones before, even if they were slightly different colors, That was just for the audience to tell them apart, it seems. But really, they all look the same to the characters in the show. So, um, Starscream makes a new group of clones here, where they're all colored after characters from G1. You've got Skywarp, Thundercracker, Sunstorm, Ramjet, and then newcomer Slipstream, who's just not named Slipstream yet because... Okay, one thing to keep in mind is that while they may be colored after, say, Skywarp and Thundercracker, and their toys said that, in the script, they didn't say that, and they weren't called that in the credits or anything, because that would mean Tom Kenny was playing even more characters that he had to get paid for. They were just Ego Starscream, Coward Starscream, because in this show, the Starscream clones, which, one, it's pretty funny that the characters that were repainted off of Starscream for all these years are literally turned into his clones. They all embody a different aspect of his personality, which just shows how extreme Starscream can go with certain personality traits, which is a lot of fun. And we get the return of stuff with Bulkhead being an artist, and this one's a lot of fun. It's mostly just set up for the next episode, but it's still good. Oh, and Megatron inducts the Constructicons into the Decepticon cause by burning Decepticon logos into their chests, and they only join just because he has good oil. Hey, this show is art, am I right? Okay, A Bridge Too Close Part 2. The Starscream and his clones attack the Decepticons. There's a huge fight. Megatron, the previous episode, threatened Bulkhead by saying he'd cut off his head if he didn't do work for him with the Headmaster unit, which now Sumdac, who's been kidnapped by him, pilots Starscream's now decapitated head because Megatron cuts off Starscream's head, and his clones immediately defect to Megatron's side because, as they say, any leader has to be an improvement over you. And the Autobot ship turns out to be Omega Supreme, which the Autobots used to fight the Decepticons, and he and the clones end up getting caught in the space bridge explosion. And okay, so along with Blur, and this episode's just insanity. Okay, but okay, wait. The Constructicons get blown away somewhere. We'll see them again. Okay, and then so the Autobots rescue. They have Sorry. They're all together. They rescue Sumdac. Everyone seems happy, but then as it turns out, Sorry, a piece of her clothes broke off, piece of her skin, because it turns out she has metal inside of her. She's a robot or something. And then instead of having the credits music, they just have this image of Starscream and Megatron. Well, Starscream's head, and Megatron handcuffs, no less, who caught in the space bridge explosion, floating in space, arguing with each other. And it'd be another 9 months before this show airs a new episode, so I'd like to think that if this show didn't get a 3rd season, well, I'm glad it did, of course. If that were the ending, that would just be so funny. Okay, Season 3, which is probably my all-time favorite season of television, begins with another 3-parter, Transwarped, which this was meant to be 2 episodes, and the 4th episode we'll get to later, as just 3 standalone episodes. Cartoon Network wanted a 3-parter after how big the show's premiere was, and they had to add another subplot to make this a 3-parter, rearrange scenes, add new scenes. It's a complete mess. It ended up becoming probably the most popular storyline in the entire series. Okay, so Sorry finds out she's not technically a robot, she's a techno-organic, like Black Arachnia was. And she gets mad at her father for having lied to her because she thought that he was her biological father. And just, this episode, what is there even to say about this episode? Okay, not that I don't want to skip over this episode, but I don't even know where to begin. I guess to begin at the beginning, where this sequence of Team Char, aka versus Team something. Okay, so Team Char is just Decepticon cameos, and Team Autobot is just Autobot cameos. Autobots, Rodimus Prime, once again voiced by Judd Nelson. Wow. Red Alert, who was originally instead of Ratchet and Bumblebee in the show, there was supposed to be Red Alert and Hotshot originally, so we get to see Red Alert and Hotshot. And who else? Never mind. Okay, so Autobot cameos versus Decepticon cameos being Strika from Beast Machines. Okay, wow. Oilslick, a guy who was made up, who even got a toy and was really cool design. Yeah, Strika Oilslick. Spitor, a guy who doesn't talk and is a giant frog, I guess. Cyclonus, who, no, he's not Skywarp from the future, guys. He's just a Cyclonus, okay? The Allspark Almanac is not true. Okay, well, not the stuff that has the yellow borders around it. That's true. That stuff is real. It happened. But any of the lore the Allspark Almanac made up, just as a quick heads up, it was just made up for fun. There were not 20 Omega Supreme things walking around Cybertron during the Great War. Anyway, so yeah, there's that with the Decepticons, and then Cosmic Rust is thrown at Rodimus Prime, and he rusts to death. And then we cut to Blur has ran across space to Cybertron, finds Longarm, who is disguised as Shockwave, finds out he is Shockwave, and then gets crushed into a cube and dies and is seemingly tossed into an incinerator when Longarm just walks over to Cliffjumper, gets a cameo, and says, "Agent Cliffjumper, dispose of this sensitive material." Yeah, that's dark. I find it funny how Beachcomber was supposed to be in this scene. It was shown off recently. Well, animated by fans, but yeah. Because I guess Derek J. Wyatt just really hated Beachcomber because he also wanted to kill him off if the show had gotten to 4th season. I don't know why he hated Beachcomber so much, but... Okay, anyway. The Headmaster comes back for the final time, takes over Starscream's body, but gets beat up by Optimus and Asari, who Asari learns finally to trust her father again. And Megatron and Starscream are doing something with Omega Supreme. Transwarped Part 2. Oh wait, the Headmaster gets beaten in this part. Anyway, okay, yeah. This is also when Blur gets crushed into a cube. Megatron and Starscream, I guess, take control of Omega Supreme, which is pretty interesting. Starry uses her key to upgrade herself, but the key also runs out of power, and she starts going on a rampage because she can't control her new abilities. And then she stabs Bumblebee, and that's just how the episode ends. She accidentally stabs Bumblebee, and as you can tell, these 2 episodes are a lot more serious than the show has been. It hasn't been this dark since Thrill of the Hunt. That's where we go to part 3. We get this, it was set up before, but as we see, we get Ratchet's history with Omega Supreme explained. Omega Supreme was, in a way, the atom bomb of the Autobots-Decepticon war. He was created by the Autobots as a last-ditch effort attempt. If Omega Supreme didn't beat the Decepticons, the Autobots were gonna lose. And Ratchet was made to be his mentor, was supposed to be Arcee, because those codes she was carrying in her head were the activation codes for Omega Supreme. Yeah, nice, again, nice how they ended up using previous plotlines instead of just making up new ones. Anyway, so we cut to the present, which is that Ratchet, throughout this whole episode, he's just these episodes, he's just sick of the fact that people are saying that as long as they've got Sari's key, they don't need the Docbot. He's kind of, they still like him, but he's old, he's obsolete. But now that the key is gone and Sari's on a rampage and Bumblebee is on the brink of death, Ratchet has to save him. He's incredibly nervous if he thinks he doesn't know if he can still save someone's life. Meanwhile, and he does manage to save Bumblebee's life, proving that he is still useful. He's not an outdated model. Just a little quick side note. I always like the story where it proves that the old mentor or whatever, he's not just old. It's not just out with the old and with the new. The old guard can still always be there to teach a few more lessons. I appreciate that. And there's also the plot of Megatron and Starscream come to Earth who have taken control of Omega Supreme and fight the Autobots with Omega Supreme. They have to switch who gets control of Omega Supreme. So the Autobots end up stopping this Megatron Starscream by having them be trapped inside of Omega Supreme, but he's instantly transwarping around the galaxy endlessly, never able to stay in one spot for long. And yeah, Sari, having come to terms with her techno-organic half, accepted her father. The key is gone, Ratchet has proved his usefulness, the Autobots have all matured, Blur is dead, the Megatron and Starscream are stuck transwarping around the galaxy, and Cybertron knows about a traitor. And so that's how Transwarp sets up Season 3. Fantastic premiere, if you ask me. Okay, 3's a crowd. The Constructicons come back, and they come back because Bulkhead gets them to help him just finish a little construction project on the remnants of Sumdac Tower, which they agree to help him because he was their friend. Within an Allspark fragment, brings to life a little construction vehicle into some guy named Dirt Boss, voiced by one of the Goodfeathers from Animaniacs. That's how ridiculous this show could get. And he tells them they need to stop working for the man. Gosh, that was weird. And they go on, the Constructicons go on this spree to control all the oil in Detroit and end up getting blown up. Not dying, but again, blown across the city, I guess, to who knows where. And the subplot is the other Autobots having to haul Lugnut out of a gigantic crater, but since he's so big, it's really hard to get him to move. Yeah, again, just a great example of how the show's sense of humor. It's kind of plots, I guess. Okay, where is thy sting? Ah, the old switcheroo trick. So, Wasp comes back, is on Earth. When Bumblebee is alone in the plant, there's this creepy horror movie scene where the lights dim, then everything turns red. Wasp beats Bumblebee up, then seems to take off his faceplate, holds up a gun to Bumblebee, and then we cut to that Bumblebee has switched spot places with Wasp because Wasp changed their paint jobs and voice synthesizers. And it's the classic, yeah, bodies changing and nobody can tell who's who. We also get introduced, finally, who they were planned to be in the show in Season 1, Jetfire and Jetstorm. A unique kind of combiner, as instead of being 5 or 6 guys, it's 2 guys that are split down the middle in their giant robot form. Oh, and Autobots can fly, because they can fly, and yeah, this one's pretty predictable, but it's really funny. Yeah, we get introduced to new characters, more stuff with Wasp is done, and then that ending where, so, Cybertron finally knows that Longarm is the traitor disguised as Shockwave. Ironhide, we see Ironhide, nice for him to get another cameo. Walking through the halls of, I guess, wherever, Iacon, I guess, who finds Ultra Magnus beaten up, nearly dead, and he asks, where's his hammer, and what happened? It says, Shockwave. And yeah, that's how this episode ends. Pretty haunting image. Okay, then, another one of my favorites, 5 Servos of Doom. We get Prowl's backstory finally in this show. Okay. During the Great War, because I guess he was there for the end of the Great War, probably pretty young there though. So, he didn't want to fight the cons, but he didn't want to get arrested either for not wanting to fight. So he ended up getting trained as a cyber ninja by Master Yokotron. Voiced by that one guy from Avatar The Last Airbender. Okay, so anyway. Yeah, we see Prowl's backstory because he suspiciously sees a bot, he can't tell who, with Master Yokotron's helmet. He's wondering, but how is that possible? We also get to see how Sentinel seemingly has captured the Decepticons, but we're wondering, how did Sentinel catch them all by himself? This is Sentinel Prime, for crying out loud. And as it turns out, Sentinel made a deal with Lockdown to capture the Decepticons to make him look good. And there's this amazing image of Sentinel's head caught in the grass of Tigatron Stadium. I love Beast Wars references. And more of Prowl's backstory is revealed, which is that Lockdown has Yokotron's helmet because Yokotron told Prowl, a former student disgraced us. And when he told Prowl to leave so he can fulfill his process over matter training by himself and returned eventually, he found Yokotron dying, being beaten up by that said former student. Prowl tries to save his master by putting his spark into the last remaining protoform that the Cyber Ninja Corps was guarding, I guess, and because all of the rest of them are stolen by Lockdown. But Yokotron just tells Prowl, you cannot sacrifice a piece of the future to bring back the past. When your time comes, you will understand. And he goes offline. And this really shakes Prowl. But in the present, he's able to complete his processor over matter training, defeat Lockdown, and make peace with his past. I always like these kinds of stories of the hero has to overcome his past obstacles and face the future. And he gets to dress like a samurai now, even though he's a ninja that makes no sense, but it looks really cool. And this wasn't a Hasbro mandate, by the way. This was a story decision. I find it funny that in the show's production bible, Marty Eisenberg had written in, yeah, Bumblebee will get some new vehicle modes occasionally in season 1, I guess, but no, he never did. And Prowl getting a new vehicle mode was a story thing. Okay. Predacons Rising. Wasp finally becomes Waspinator because he's captured by Black Arachnia, tricked into becoming a techno-organic like her, because she thinks that if she can cure him, she can cure herself. So he becomes Waspinator, but instead of being dumb comic relief like he was in Beast Wars, he's not super funny anymore. Now he's menacing and tries to murder the Autobots. And Bumblebee finally tries to apologize to Wasp instead of just saying, "I'm sorry, I was duped into thinking you were a traitor." Wasp forgives him, but Waspinator does not forgive him. Black Arachnia ends up meeting Sentinel, who Sentinel finally sees what happened to her and thinks she's some kind of disgusting, ugly monster and wants her dead because he thinks that it's not worth keeping her online. Oh, wow, that's some deep stuff. Some heavy theming in the show. And Waspinator's transwarp energy that he was transformed with to become a techno-organic is going to cause a giant explosion. So Black Arachnia webs her and Waspinator up, and they seem to have been destroyed from the explosion. But as we see at the end, they ended up on some Beast Wars-esque prehistoric Earth, where Black Arachnia sees the Season 1 Maximals minus Dinobot in their beast modes, and Waspinator has survived, much like in Beast Wars, having been obliterated into multiple pieces but is still alive and crawling around. This episode probably has some of the show's worst animation, but again, the show's animation is never terrible, and it's really well written. Which this episode is also the third of three episodes in a row where it takes place at night and there's no humans, just Autobots. These are some of my favorites, not because they don't have humans. I mean, anime is one of the few times where I like humans in Transformers, but it's nice to get a focus on the Autobots. Okay, Human Error Part 1. Powell, who is back, has taken the original Soundwave toy that Megatron made, is selling it all across the city, and, I guess, oh my god, the one the Autobots get when they're sleeping, it's, no, not when they're sleeping, but it spikes their oil when they're not looking, and when they drink it and then fall asleep into stasis lock, they are all in a dream where they think they're humans, and Optimus Prime looks like David Kaye. It's kind of like an episode from G1, except way better. And I really like this one was a two-parter, even though it technically didn't need to be, but it did need time to breathe. And the episode ending with the gigantic virtual reality Soundwave holding up the Autobots saying, "Autobots inferior, Soundwave superior" is a great cliffhanger. I always like to hear that classic line of Soundwave superior. And the human Autobots fight the Decepticons, who are giant compared to them, which is an interesting thing because while the Decepticons were huge to the Autobots, they were never as gigantic. They're practically Godzilla compared to humans. Okay, Human Error Part 2. Sorry brings together Snarl, who was the pet of one of the Constructicons, who was gonna call him Slag, but I think he took it as an insult, and Wreck-Gar, who she's found, and they team up to free the Autobots from Soundwave, and defeat Soundwave, and we see that Soundwave, instead of having Laserbeak and Ravage and Ratbat or whatever as cassettes, they're guitars, and Optimus Prime grabs Ratbat and turns him into plays his guitar music to fight Soundwave, and uses Ratbat as an axe to cut Soundwave into pieces. Yeah, and of course Soundwave survives, which we even see. Laserbeak just grabs his remains and flies away. This episode is completely bonkers in the best way possible. Okay, Decepticon Air. We're moving into the endgame now. So, the elite guard of Sentinel, Jazz, Jetfire, and Jetstorm are transporting Decepticon prisoners, including Swindle, who they just found sitting on Earth, stuck in his vehicle mode. And an electrical storm they fly through. Fixes Swindle's programming. He transforms back into his robot mode, releases the prisoners, and has them stage a mutiny against the Autobots. And they have to call in Optimus Prime to sneak through Swindle's personal storage dimension because it's connected to a transwarp field, and the Autobots now have a space bridge they built. And personal storage dimension is how Swindle opens up a case in his chest, which is where all his arms, all his weapons come from, and Optimus Prime sneaks through. And it's practical. I know it's some parody of some movie, but this feels like Die Hard almost, with the one guy having to escape through the tunnels from these tough prisoners or criminals, I guess. Yeah, this one's great. It's also another example of Sentinel Prime seems to have become a better person, but then the next time we see him, he's back to being a jerk. I like that about his character. And also, while the Decepticons are caught, I believe, they're still captured by the Autobots. Lugnut has been flown into space and just so happens to come across Omega Supreme, where Megatron and Starscream are, and that's how it ends. Okay, this is why I hate machines. Fanzone's only really big role in season 3, and it's his best showcase. He and Ratchet get transwarped to Cybertron, where we see how Sumdac hates machines. That's his catchphrase. This is why I hate machines. Except all Cybertronians are terrified of Sumdac Fanzone because he's an organic. And Ratchet and Fanzone uncover this crazy conspiracy involving RC, Shockwave, and Sentinel Prime, and Omega Supreme is hanging over Cybertron. And Sentinel Prime just wants to shoot Omega Supreme, which would, blow him up and cause and the energy he's carrying would, destroy Cybertron. But Sentinel Prime says he'll take the risk anyway. He'd do it again too. Oh boy. Jazz joins the Autobots at the end of the episode, and yeah, a lot happens here. And it's just really funny. Rat Trap gets a cameo as a Cybertronian called Rattle Trap. We get a lot of cameos from characters actually, like Firestar, or I guess Nova Star here. Trax gets a cameo. Yeah, a lot happens in this one. It's just really funny too. The best part, character dynamics aren't good when they're two guys with the same personality bouncing off each other like the MCU always does. Even in its heyday. It's best when it's two guys with unique personalities bouncing off each other. That's the funniest. And yeah, the Decepticons, with Shockwave having rejoined them, and now purple instead of gray, they are ready for their big master plan. Okay, Endgame Part 1, the series finale. Way better than Avengers Endgame, but still not great. So, the Decepticons are once again going to take control of Omega Supreme to attack Detroit, which they should have attacked Cybertron. That would have made more sense. That was their end goal, but this is supposed to be a field test, so fair enough. And Megatron wants to build clones of Omega Supreme with him controlling them, but they end up looking like Lugnut because of stuff that happens. Until they're Lugnut Supremes that attack Earth. Now that's art. Optimus gets a jetpack, and he has to wield Ultra Magnus Hammer, except he feels that he's not a hero. He's not worthy of the hammer. He's not worthy of facing such a big threat. And the Autobots have to prepare for their ultimate test. Endgame Part 2. The Autobots board Omega Supreme, defeat Shockwave, save RC, save the protoforms. I think that Lockdown, and remember those protoforms Lockdown stole? He gave those to the Decepticons, which is how they made those Lugnut Supreme clones to begin with. Optimus faces off against Megatron, with Prowl sacrifices himself in a really great moment, and in another great moment throughout the entire show, Megatron has called every one of the main cast just Autobot. But at the brink, when he nearly dies, all he's able to say is, "At least I'll have the satisfaction of destroying you, Optimus Prime." And Optimus just stares him down and says, "So you can remember my name." Great stuff. And the Autobots have to hold up Prowl's dead body, but just as they do, Megatron shows up once more, except Optimus swings the hammer at him and Megatron thinks he's just going to kill him, but Optimus instead just locks him up in handcuffs and says, "That would be the easy way out, Megatron. You don't deserve it." They return to Cybertron as the entire crowd of people cheers them on. They've all got great looks on their faces, but it's still kind of sad because they're carrying Prowl's coffin, and You can see Sentinel in the front of the crowd looking really mad that Optimus Prime, his this dumb maintenance bot, all these dumb maintenance bots beat the toughest Decepticons and have proven themselves worthy as heroes. And the music plays with Optimus wearing the Allspark fragments in the thing that looks like the Matrix of Leadership on his chest, showing that the show would have continued. Optimus is finally one step closer, and since this is the last episode, in a way, he has become the Optimus Prime we all know him to be, the great heroic leader of the Autobots. And that was Transformers Animated. But before I get to the conclusion, I just want to tell you where to watch this. You could either buy the DVD on Amazon, which DVDs are cool. You should totally buy them. You should totally buy it. I mean, you can play DVD. If you don't have a DVD player or one on your computer, you can. If you have a Blu-ray player, you can watch a DVD or PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and you get some special features. It's pretty cool. I like DVDs. Most people watch it on Tubi, which is a good way, except you have ads. Or you could just watch it on YouTube from the 10,000 people that uploaded it. If you're gonna watch one, I recommend the playlist from Magnus After Dark. He has definitely the best resolution copy. And so, yeah, that was Transformers Animated. I love this show, as if I'm sure you could tell. And it's just this show is unique from other Transformers shows. We really get to a lot like Beast Wars though. We get to see this journey of this ragtag group becoming really close family and becoming the heroes that we all know they could be. Except before in Beast Wars, they really were just a bunch of random dudes we'd never met before. These are the G1 characters. Well, not Bulkhead, but pointing to stuff like Optimus Prime. We know Optimus Prime to be this great leader, but here we get to see him become that great leader, and it's really impactful. Sure, I wish the show had gotten a fourth season. I mean, there's plans with Black Arachnia and maybe getting Devastator, but probably not. And the plans with that episode where Bumblebee becomes the king to Minicons or something because he's huge. That would have been so much fun, but I'm really happy with the show we did get. Transformers Anime is easily my favorite version of the brand and my favorite show ever. And I'm glad that over the years it has gotten a lot of recognition as one of the best parts of the franchise. It totally deserves its acclaim, and honestly, I'm surprised people like Transformers Prime more than this one. Maybe that's just because it's darker, which I've ragged on Transformers Prime multiple times in this video, but I do like Transformers Prime. It's just that I could never even compare it to this. This is just so much better in my opinion, but that's all I gotta say on Transformers Animated, and boy, at the length of this video, the algorithm is gonna kill me. So, again, if you like this video, like and subscribe, and I've got more videos to make, I guess, sometime else, and just a question for the people in the comments. What's your favorite Transformers show? And actually, what do you think of Transformers Animated? Do you think it's one of the best shows in the franchise, or even the best? Uh, Comment down below, and just a word, the next video will be another Sonic video. So stay tuned for that. That's all for now, and Excelsior!